Hi, ladies. This is Carly Austin. This is week 3 discussion post. I'm going to dive right in talking about the differences and the similarities of experiences for women, not only in the United States, but globally. In one of our articles this week, The Catalyst, it states that in August of 2020, the Fortune Global list only had 13 women who were CEOs of Fortune Global 500 companies, and all of them were white women. As you continue down into the reading, you can see that the presentation of women was decreasing in executives, senior managers, and so on by a fairly high percentage, especially support staff at 47%. As you see in some countries, there are quota or targets for women in corporate boards. France, Germany, India, Italy, and the Netherlands, Norway, and South Korea are among the countries that have implemented quotas for women on boards of public companies. As we dive into the wage gap, the representation of women in places of power, one thing I think we can comment on is Vice President Kamala Harris taking a pretty big step for the women fight in going into a place of power and leadership. So I know that that's not something that we see a lot of. Recently in our Super Bowl, we had our first female referee, which was super, super cool. But, those things don't usually happen in more foreign countries. So if you're looking more at the differences, is one thing that's really, really important is paid maternity leave. We in America don't really receive a lot of paid maternity leave comparative to other countries around the world. For example, you can get in Estonia, you get 86 weeks of paid leave. In Denmark, you get up to 40. In the U.S., 0 weeks of paid leave for new parents. The government mandates in these other countries that people have time with their children to create the connection with their child, especially women. There's a lot of women out there, especially in low income and in poverty areas, where they have their child and then a week later they have to be back at work, which definitely causes issue for the parent to child connection. As we go into different regions amongst the U.S., something I thought was interesting in one of the articles that gave us a map, I believe it was the status of women in the states, gave us a great map. First thing I looked at was employment and earnings. Idaho ranked 49 in women with the employments and earnings. That was an F. Maryland ranked number 2, a B+. What I thought was even more interesting is that if we click something else, I did reproductive rights. Oregon ranked number 1 as, being in on the reproductive rights, pushing for it. And Idaho was 48, an F. Both states, super close to each other, couldn't be farther on the spectrum from one another on the status of women and its reproductive rights. So I thought that was really interesting. But overall, Idaho seems to not really be into women power. I thought that was really interesting, and that map kind of gave me an idea, general locations of where women were respected and urged to pursue and to be taken care of and heard. A lot more rural and southern states struggle with kind of implementing those things. As we dive deeper into this week's discussion post, one of the questions was, what factors do you see impacting women's global leadership opportunities? Where do you see opportunities and where do you see barriers? What strategies can you imagine women using to confront any and all challenges? I personally believe that opportunities and barriers come from ignorance. There is an ignorance about women and our capabilities, and within the workforce, within politics, within education, within any moment of power, that we are emotional and that we have a really hard time breaking down cognitive thinking. I thought this was really interesting in one of my psychology classes. A lot of men said that women are too emotional to do jobs. And as we look at women, we give birth, we manage households, we work actual physical jobs while also maintaining the emotional welfare of families and loved ones. And I think that some of the barriers that we face is that because we are so good at managing those things, it sometimes feels like men are threatened by that. And I think that that's a very bold statement to say, and one that is said often, but shows truth. I think we as women can show empathy for the fact that it is hard to understand something that you've been taught all your life. I know that my grandmother, had a very in the house kind of upbringing. You cook, you clean, and you only work if you have to. Then my mother became a self-employed businesswoman, and she was all about independence. And I think there's a level of balance that you don't have to shame a woman for wanting to be a stay-at-home mom, but also knowing that that's a job in itself, and that a woman that wants to climb the political or the social ladder, like Oprah or Kamala Harris, or Latina singers that have a voice. One that comes to mind is Shakira and Jennifer Lopez have such a voice in politics, and I think that what we forget often is that as long as we see the challenges and continue to attack them with grace, we'll continue to rise. I think something that we struggle with leadership is that men don't want to give over the totem. And unfortunately, instead of giving it over, we're just having to take it now. And my best example of that is one of the vice president debates when Pence was talking, and over Kamala Harris, and it was her turn. She goes, "Excuse me, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking." And it was in that moment that I realized that's not even a barrier. That's just a basic instinct for most men, I believe, to believe that they're higher up, that they have a right to speak over us. And in that moment, and in the moment when she was sworn in, we were shown that not only do we have a voice, but we can speak up for our voice. And I think that that's most important, is to continue to speak, and that's the most important way to challenge the stigma of women in this country and globally. I know it's definitely more difficult in countries outside of the United States of America, but hey, little by little, voices, that's what's important. Thank you so much for listening, and can't wait to see your comments.